Somebody asked if we can teach bill of materials. Bill of materials differ from person to person, and each estimator, also each contractor and scope of work. This is just a basic example. For example, you have a project, so you have the scope or the summary. For me personally, I had these ones subcontracted, so I divided it into 4 major categories: site preparation, general requirements and site works, structural, which you will see the shell of the building, finishing, where you will see the final outside finishes, not the inside of the walls, and then utilities such as mechanical, plumbing, or our pipes and lines. Then I separated site development because this does not equate to the gross floor area of the building. So it's a lot easier to manage because oftentimes they upgrade outside the building and it affects the percentages of the building itself. And then I have some interior fit outs or development because sometimes we put our kitchen here as basic plywood and then suddenly they upgrade to modular cabinets and it's so hard to look for it. So for example, I'll put this here over to this page. You have the summary over here, and then if I go to each page, I have the breakdown. So I deleted the division 1 and 2 yet because it's already done. So like concreting, you can have your columns, beams, slabs, stairs, footing, concrete, such as your cement, sand, and gravel over here. And then if you're going to follow the master format or the 16 division, it's going to look like this. Division 3 is concrete. Division 4 masonry. Division 5 metals. So over at metals, actually we will have here our reinforced steel bars here in metals. Because these divisions are mostly divided by types of materials you would buy in the hardware. For example, all of these metals can be found in the hardware that specializes in steel or metal, so it will be easier for me to purchase all the metals here in one specific supplier. But for the scope of work, actually our metals for reinforced steel bar should be done before concreting of the columns. That's why I say it depends really on what it's used for. Because if you show this to the client, they will not understand this because it's just a bill of materials. It's just listed all the materials needed, but it does not necessarily mean that you will do the concrete first before the metal in actual construction. Same thing if we go to utilities, we have plumbing and electrical. If I go over to my plumbing and electrical, actually I do not need to put the fixtures first, right? Like the sink, the sala lamp, dining lamp. We need our wirings first. So I'm rearranging them because if you're going to quote for electrical works, it's actually nice to put them all together, the wires and the fixtures. But the problem with this is that our electrical fixture can be upgraded by the client, so you need to know where to put OSM or owner supplied materials. So I made a new one here. This is like the 50th template I made, depending on the project, wherein we have the rough-in of plumbing. So instead of just putting their utilities, I can put their like rough-ins. Okay, other people call them roughing, but it's a rough-ins before the finishing. So for example, these sewer line pipes, actually, before even the floor or the ceiling are made, often we already have these laid out, our water lines, because we embed them into the wall most of the time, right? Unless they are surface type where you can see them. But I would like to put them in rough-ins so that before we finish our walls, like our interior walls, we already have rough-ins. I have my PPR pipe inside the wall. And then when we come over to finishes, once they enclose the wall, I can also put now my fixtures. So you see this is very messed up for now because I'm still rearranging them, but I can show you other templates I made. But before that, this is an example of callouts. Everything I placed in SketchUp, like if I place a tile there, what building information modeling means is I can extract the face area for me to compute the number of tiles. Not only that, but also including my specialties and fixture, I already have these are extracted from SketchUp itself. I didn't type anything yet. Also my ceiling, my spandrels, I have the areas and linear meter. Now a summary I made before will look like this, where if we are the contractor and a developer's tile, we always focus on the floor area. That's why you would see cost per square meter, because it's so easy to cost based on the floor area. But my site development is not a floor area when it comes to like fencing and gates. So these ones always come with a standard inclusion of what is included here. There's a breakdown and then the type of material, so that each time we upgrade a square meter or floor area, we know what materials it covers. But as architects and professionals, we use the word estimate instead of contract price, because we are not working as contractors unless you have your PCAB license. We only build usually what we design in our professional scope of services. It's like we are also the surgeon if we are the physician. So this is just an example. You can see here OSM, owner supplied materials for furnishings and furniture, conveying systems, if any, pressure pump or any additionals will be discussed. But this was my old template. You would see an example here of the same thing, division 1 to 16 supposedly, but then this one is by lump sum or cubic meter, material, labor. So these ones are used for easy transaction, especially if you already have standard inclusions. You can use the per square meter. But if you're still starting, of course, you don't have much construction experience, you don't know how much you work, your project management, and your overhead costs, meaning to say, do you have a truck? Do you have heavy equipment? Are you sufficing the employees for 1 month? How many employees, engineers, architects, and admin do you have? Then you can increase your cost depending on those. But if you're working alone as direct supervision, it's automatically lower. But then you should break all of these down, because this is where scam happens. So for example, this one is easily for quotation. We can already see the building in 4 divisions. We have the site development and interior upgrades. And then we have the breakdown of the material, labor, OCM is overhead, contingency, and miscellaneous, and then the total work. But if you have your workers, these labors by percentage will not always work. For example, in finishes, we will go to the bill of materials and look for finishes way over down here, and say that our paints were based on the wall area and how many gallons. But if you see here, it's not actually broken down into the exact number of gallons, it's per square meter. That's why it's still not the most detailed yet. Of course, because if you're in the schematic stage or development stage, it's still okay to do by unit cost, per square meter or per lump sum. But as you are finalizing it for construction and the total construction cost, it needs to be the exact amount as you would buy in the hardware, such as this one, 65 pieces, and then you can offset it for breakage aside from your OCM. So I know that 119,000 will be for my paint, and then I would go there and look for the labor. But you see here, it's also not broken down, so I do not know how much labor cost goes into paint alone, because those finishes go into ceiling, concrete finish, or wall finish, tiles, and then painting. So I have another example where I break them down even further so that I can subcontract it and have the workers or the painter quote it beforehand, and I will have a more realistic approach to my bill of quantities. As you see here, our utilities in the right format, as even the fixture is with the rough ends, because I would like all the plumbing to be together, so that I can ask the plumber to quote for the labor of all plumbing from start to finish. So before buhos, before concrete pouring, he can come in and do the sewer and water lines. And then during the finishing stage, months later, he can come back and do these ones. At least I already have a basis for costing. That's why these ones are grouped per trade or per profession or per hardware. and it will not suffice for the scope of works from start to finish for clients who want to know, oh, what will we do this month? That's why you have a Gantt chart or progress chart, also these ones. Okay, so for example, you see here in electrical down here, it actually says service drop. Service drop is part of electrical, but actually service drop, you do this before actual construction starts. That's why before you even do your site development, you need a service drop for your electricity and temporary electrical connection. So in actual project, this electrical is not the last thing to do. These are just divided by trades because we usually work with subcontractors or tradesmen. This is the same thing, but there's a slight deviation where I can divide them into A, B, C, D, E, F, so that I know the stages of construction I will do and each trade that I will give them to. It really depends how organized you want to be. As INFJ, this is where my OC kicks in. Now during the pre-design stage, because I do not have any direct bill of materials or costing, or the design is not yet finished, I can have some estimates. For example, overhead cost, instead of doing it as a percentage of the total cost, I see how much per month will suffice. Say 30,000 a month can suffice for our overhead facilities, inspection, permits, documentation, and supervision. So for example, you treat it like employment, it will be a lot clearer to you. Now, this does not apply for those who want to act like contractors. The things you see in Facebook, that bare finish, luxury, standard, per square meter, that's contractor style. You need to know how to compute in order to get to those, because we all differ. If you are magastos, of course, those won't work for you. For example, they say, bare 24,000 per square meter. So does it mean even if it's just a porch with only one wall on one side, you're gonna charge 24,000? What if I charge 10,000? Because according to the pre-design that we have, they won't even add much railings or windows or walls or ceiling. So it's kind of unfair to charge 24, but that's really up to you. In the Code of Ethics of the Architect, it says just and easy to deal with without avarice. In short, hindi siya mukhang pera. I know that the profession and the industry is corrupted and we are all struggling to survive to get in more cash. But of course, you need to find a balance, not over budget, not under budget, but just enough with the exact same explanation. That's why you do not only stop at drawings, you need to explain to the client, this is our lowest cost that we can give for a hollow block with 3.6 meters in length. You don't see those in the per square meter costing. And then if you want to upgrade this into glass, then we have another cost for that. You can do it something like that. Now this is what the client wants to see. They usually want to see like the breakdown of what comes first and how many percent progress it makes. For example, after site clearing and temporary barracks, we start the foundation, columns, so basically the structural, and then we can extend to the shell, such as the walls, and the utilities here are the rough-ins. So they do not understand usually this one, right? Because our rough-ins here are actually in down here. Power line, sewer line, water line. But these ones, according to schedule, will go in month number, let's say 8. Example, if you spend too much time, if you are using 12 months as your basis. But usually for us, we go around 8 months target, so we can adjust all of these. So you have to explain that to the client. This is the maximum with lag time, with typhoon for 2 months, something like that. But this is not enough to give the final construction costing, because if you do this before the design, it will always change. But you still need to be just and easy to deal with. So that's why it looks like this. Okay. Now I made another template again. Or if you want to do subcontracting, actually This one is by an OJT group of architecture students. I said, oh, I won't feed you. I won't spoon feed you. I won't teach you how to estimate. You go to the hardware, look for the actual pricing, you canvas, and you estimate, because they were trying to estimate for my table. So they came up with 2,000 pesos. My budget was 3,000. So we saved almost 1,000, and they had food for snacks and some allowances. Our electricals are also based here on the load schedule that we do in our blueprints. So the type of conduit, this is the material. The wire size, cost, all different costing, especially depending on the brand. Let's say like 𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗽𝗶𝗽 sells per box around 6,800, let's say for example. And another brand is a lot cheaper, but they sell per meter. So it's really your understanding of building of materials and the work in construction that will help you design and draft better. But for my workflow, I extract them all from Sketchup. So my roof beams from Sketchup, I have not edited anything. It's directly from Sketchup. I have the volumes and they can just total. And the areas, in case I want to paint all around the beam, for example, after it's done and there's no drop ceiling, then I already have a surface area. And this is the one that I made during pandemic. It's also the same thing, except we divided them with additional work costs. For example, in second page, look, I have site preparation and earthwork. I have the work cost. It's based on the area, for example, and the cubic meter to be excavated, and I have the costing. And right here below each work, I already add the percentage for overhead, contingency, and miscellaneous, the supervision and profit, and then indirect costs like deliveries, or let's say some food and water, so that, for example, these costs became subcontracted to another person, then it will not affect the total. The problem is, usually many people do direct costs and then materials, labor, right? The materials and labor equal the direct cost, and then they get the percentage of that direct cost for supervision, miscellaneous. So when one work is removed, the whole thing changes and it becomes hard to calculate again. Why? Because usually you put 40% of materials as your labor, right? But actually, when you come to painting works, let's say this is the material cost, 40% of the materials is not really for labor. Most of the time, our painters cost more than 100% of the materials, because they do not look at, oh, how much did you spend for paint? Okay, if you spend 50,000 for paint, then I will charge you 50,000. They don't do that. They look at the work, they look at how many painters can do the work, how many weeks, so you can compute per the labor. So I have another template for that again, which is this one. For example, in 1 week, almost 4,500 goes to labor for 3 people who are not even in the full day. This is just during barracks and temporary connections. I can spend 12,000 all the way up to 30,000. It will be full force. The same thing can go to labor, because if you subcontract, let's say, a laborer for painting, or if you subcontract a painter for painting works and he gets laborers and helpers, he will pay them daily. So doing by percentage without understanding how it works might be overpriced or under budget. That's why you always base it on the design. This design, what materials go into it and how will it be done and what equipments are needed. Then you go towards the hardware and then canvas the price. Of course, you cannot just keep canvassing without buying. That's why you have online research and previous experience. Now all of these, if I compute this, the cost per square meter of this will be different from the other project just based on location and how far it is from the hardware because of deliveries. So when you put something like mobilization, demobilization, 3 lump sum, it's very easy, right? But if you ask what's the breakdown, then it will be a lot easier because you have the bill of materials and then you can put a costing. That's why estimating will really help you not only in construction but also in your design. This is the typical one that you see people make, right? Because if you know how to estimate, look at this, steel door and frame, flush wood doors, it's very open-ended. So you need to put there if, okay, as long as it's flush wood, even if the material is ordinary wood, not smooth on four sides, as long as it says flush wood. Especially if you give this to a contractor or a builder, they will just follow it as per plan. If you are not closed-ended, meaning to say you don't put a specific brand, they will just get anything. And you don't even know the breakdowns here. So these types of estimate is usually used for permits and banks. That's what people do. See, people put the cost, they put the percentage of contingency, which is 10%. They put labor, which is, I don't know how many percent they did this. Oh, 45%. See there, 0.45. And then you have the direct cost, which is the total of the three. Then you have indirect, supervision, and profit. And then this one is a special equipment. Then you have the total project cost. So it really differs because this one was for subcontracting, meaning to say you are not the one to provide everything. Now you can see online other people are also teaching how to estimate with Google Sheets and Excel calculators. If you put the length, the width, and the thickness, and you know how many of them will come out for concrete. And because I work as my own project manager and sometimes as consultant for other developers, we also have different types of construction methods. For example, in this specific project, we are using steel framing or cold form light gauge steel frame. So I have cost per linear meter. And then, of course, walls have two surfaces, back and front, and then the edges, so we have square meter for double walls. So I have the specific length here, which brings me the number of pieces. For example, for 46 meters divided by 6 meters, so 6 meter length, 10 mm is 8 pieces for 46. And then I get the price, and then look for the updated price in the hardware. Then I already have the labor cost here and the work total. But the OCM is not yet here. Then we have that one versus the conventional, versus only the shell, versus without the footing. So it really differs. Here I go into more specific details because my glass worker actually charges me per square foot. So I cannot just guess like how much. So I usually put here like in X or my formula, I get the area of the opening. So window 1 has 1.68 square meters. We have 2 pieces. And for example, he charges me 2,500 per square meter. Okay? I know it might be overpriced, but I have the specifications of what is window 1. Is it series 900 with a mosquito screen, with jambs, or glazed glass, tinted, reflective? So over in my data, I actually have my own computations here. Bathroom wall tiles, what's the length, width, and height? So you do these ones, especially if you're just given a PDF file. You have your own computation or calculators. And I made specific one for the steel frame because I'm into math. So I made my own formulas. And then if it's negative or positive, it will tell me if it's true or false. Like if the window is greater than 2.4, then I will have to reconsider the height and the area. Something like that. But these days, I just rely on SketchUp. I just draw over it, and then get the exact dimensions. But of course, I still know how to do the basics. For example, we have the base metal thickness of the basement until the roof. Here is the linear meter. And I will get the height length minus the openings or the doors and windows. So this is very technical. I made this during pandemic to have my own formula. I did not rely on other people's formula because I know the principle of the basic math. Okay, so I have the square root as well. Then now we have just something like this. See, this is one of the easier style where you just do a percentage of the direct cost. So it really depends on you how accurate you want to be, but of course it takes more time. For these kinds of estimates, I'm already done in 1 day. Less than. But for these types of estimates, it takes me 1 to 3 days to finish everything, as long as the design is fulfilled. And if I have the SketchUp model, then 1 day is enough. But if you give it to me from a PDF, from a CAD file, then I have to remeasure everything. But at least now I have per scope of work. So that's it for those who ask about an overview of bill of materials. This is the material, this is the quantity, this is the unit, and then these are the costings. And if you combine everything together, it becomes the bill of quantities, or BOQ. Estimates just the estimated cost, and if you want to go into a contract, you put a TCP, or a total contract price, especially if you're acting as a contractor or developer. But if you're a professional, the nice thing with estimates is, like, if you're a doctor, you do the surgery first, you do the procedures, and then as the surgery or the checkups go on, it will be additional costing. But of course, there needs to be a clause or a written contract that this is not strictly the ceiling. That's why in your SPP, you will see there is a maximum guaranteed cost. If you want to have an agreement with the client that if we go over 3.5, I will pay the excess, because it's called maximum guaranteed cost. But many people don't do that because it's very risky, except contractors. That's why there's what they call 𝗟𝗓𝗓. They also have performance bonds, insurance bonds, and retentions. Retentions meaning to say costing that will not be released by the client until the work is done and fully fulfilled according to the specs, plans, and turnover with quality. But for us as direct professionals who can do design and build services, we can actually put a clause, example, for site construction until, let's say, number 12, until plumbing, we can put a fixed cost. But if you decide to go to a kitchen sink and upgrade it, then we can do plus minus. For example, you wanted a kitchen sink that is 10,000, but the budget I place here is 5,000. You have to add 5,000. It really depends on you as the project manager, how things will be done, because we all differ. And now I'm making like my 50th template because the project also differs on coordination. If there are supervisors or other suppliers or other consultants.